Welcome to another episode of the Schlegel Design Remodel Podcast. We have returning guest, Ron of Schlegel Design Remodel. Ron Webster, can you tell us how you got into remodeling and a little bit about your background? Because I know you were on the podcast last year, but I don't think I asked you those questions. And I think it's interesting how people get into it.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Amy. No, I've been in the industry for, I consider 30 years. It's been over 30 years, but I'm always trying to make it lower. I started out not knowing really what I wanted to do right out of high school. And then I took a year off of high school, kind of looked around and kind of figured out what I wanted. And I went to Johnson County Community College, went through their interior merchandising and design program over there. It was a great school, great teachers. This was back in 1988 when everything was DOS based. So that's how old I am. And it was a great experience. However, after I left that school and started getting into, the workforce, I started, and I worked also for Calico Corners for 4.5 years, which broke me into design and kind of told me a little bit about what I did and didn't want to do. My interest is more architectural and and drafting. That's what I grew up doing, even all through high school. So I wanted to do something more in that. So I started doing cabinetry because that kind of gives me the best of both worlds. And I was able to design, be creative, and interact with people, and a fun time doing what I do. And, I wanted to become an architect and or a drafter, but then I'd be sitting in a room by myself for days and hours at a time. And that's just not fun to me.
Right. It depends on the personality.
It does. And my personality is more interactive, and I really love working with people and talking to people. So that's the direction I went, and just started doing that through, a few different companies in Kansas City, did some cabinetry designing for those companies, and then ultimately landed the dream job at Schlegel by doing almost the same thing, but much more involved. In between all that, I also had my own remodeling company, started from 2005 through 2010. And the recession kind of took me out of that. But that was a great learning experience also. And my years back, in the 80s and 90s, my years with Payless Cashways in the building industry brought me into where I'm at today. With all the different experiences I've had, I think it kind of rounded me out with having knowledge in multiple areas.
You have tons of background, which I think sets you up for your point, being really good at what you're doing today, as far as its selections, but it's also the layout. And there's so much more than just making it pretty.
Yes.
But I also think it sets you up perfectly for the conversation we're having today, which is budgeting for a remodel, because you've been through all of those ups and downs in both the economy. You've worked with clients on your own. You've worked with clients here. You've worked with clients on more of the soft finishing. So you kind of get to speak to all worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when you look at today's economy, you look at today's climate, as far as the financial part of it, everybody is different. Some people are trying to hold on to their money. Some people are spending their money. Some people don't know what to do. And it is difficult in this day and age. And what I usually tell people to do is to be realistic with what you're wanting to do and what you need to do. And I think that is, there are wants and needs that everybody has to kind of go through in their remodeling project, but you have to really prioritize what your needs are and what your wants are. Once you have that and you know exactly what you need to do in that house, and this also depends on how long you've been in the house. It depends on what your goal is for that house. Are you planning on staying in that house for 2 or 3 years, or 15 to 20 years, or if it's a forever house? There are so many different aspects of everybody's situation could differ so many different ways. It's very difficult to say, this is the right way to do it because it's different for everybody's situation. I just think being realistic with your budget is real important, but you also have to know how to arrive at a budget. And that is the next thing I want to kind of get into.
Yeah. Well, I guess we could go either way, but I was going to ask, how do you guide people to know what their need is versus their want? Because I have to imagine most people don't need a brand new this or that. Some do, but a lot of them don't. So how do you guide what is a need and what is a want?
Well, I set everything up as a priority. You prioritize everything that you're living in now that you don't like and you want to change. So if you have a kitchen that has a bad floor plan, well, that's a need and you want to change that. If you have a kitchen that you would like to have a microwave somewhere else, or you want to do something, that's a kind of a want in a way. It still applies to function, but there are certain things that you can do that can make the wants and your needs different. So when you're prioritizing that, you're looking at all the different things that you want to change. And I tell people this all the time: look at everything that you want and make a column of each one. Make a column of all your wants and make a column of all your needs. I get all your needs in there, but then all your wants, I will try and push as many of those wants in there as possible, depending on budget limitations.
So it's literally like when you're dating and you make a list of qualities you want and qualities that are maybe.
That's a very good analogy. Yes.
That's your dating your remodel.
Yeah. I think it's a very important thing to look at what your long-term goals for that house, because that tells you everything. If you're going to be in that house for 2-3 years, your wants and needs are completely different. And you may have a list of 3 things that you need to do to sell the house and get a good return and get out. If you're going to be in that house for 15, 20 years, if not more, or they're going to carry you out of that house, this is the time that you need to spend time thinking about what you want over those next 20, 30 years or more. Because when you're building a house, you're building a legacy for your family. So it is basically putting all those things in place so that your family can one day pass it down.
So besides just longevity in your house, how else do you arrive at a realistic budget for a project? And to your point, every family is different, but I'm sure getting to that point is similar for so many people.
Sure. Unless you're in the industry and unless you know or have done remodeling before, whether it's a DIY project or you've done some small contracting in there, most people don't know how to arrive at a budget. It is one of the things that a lot of people think it's so easy to come up with a budget number and stick to it. Well, again, going back to being realistic, you have to look at the scope of work that you're dealing with. And if you're looking at a scope of work right now that is, I want to finish my basement. Well, you have to look at the square footage of your basement, how many rooms you're going to finish down there. Are egress windows necessary or not, depending on your city? And it is for a bedroom, but now some of those cities are now requiring it in the living space, like a recreational area. So there are so many different things that we have to take into account when we're looking at arriving at a budget. I would say not the best way, but a really good way to do it is to get some rough estimates from people about what you think this could run, and understand when they give you that number, whoever it is, even us, that number is going to change because we're giving you a number based on the square footage. We're basing it off of the finishes that you're wanting, whether it's a basic, medium, or high-end finish. Each one of those has a different budget range, and everybody's expectation of mid and high are completely different. So it really depends on the person. And I think that when you start looking at all of the different categories of basements, kitchens, bathrooms, they will vary so much depending on the size, your, the taste of the client. They may want something upper end because for me, for my clients, I get Pinterest boards all the time and I see what they want. And then I also see that, you know, I don't want anything fancy, but it is fancy and it is nice. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just costs more to do it. So I think that there are so many different ways to arrive at a budget, but getting a few estimates. And when I say a few, 2 to 3 is really all you really need, but get them from reputable contractors, people that are in this industry who have good reviews, who are licensed, insured, and they can pull permits. They are a certified remodeler. Those are the things that you really want to be really careful with. But once you start looking at what those companies can offer you, then you can kind of get a good sense of what your budget could be for that project. The problem is, sometimes a client will give one company one scope of work and then give another company another scope of work, and it's two different prices. Well, it's apples and oranges. If you keep the same scope of work and give it to 3 different companies, you should get somewhat of a pretty close range of price between the two or 3.
So step one, you would suggest, okay, let's just say we need a new kitchen. We've known we need a new kitchen and we feel like we're saved enough, but now we need to figure it out if we have enough. So your first step is kind of drafting what that looks like. Like we want to rip everything out and basically change the function of our kitchen. So that's our scope that we're going to send to 3 different contractors. When you say get a budget, are you talking like a full-blown bid or a rough estimate? Okay.
Well, this is going to be the first initial one is going to be a rough estimate. This is kind of ballpark where I think you're going to be within, plus minus your selections and changes to a scope of work and final plans. Again, there could be a lot of changing going on as you're going through that process. And working with a designer who knows exactly what they're doing and how to take you through that process from start to finish, that is what helps the client kind of navigate what they want, what they need, how much they want to spend, and so forth.
Okay. Ron, is there any other items clients should consider outside of just the remodeling budget in a remodeling project?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you're working with a designer and a company that is a design build company like ours, the aspect of the engineering, architectural design, the actual design, all those things come into play when you're budgeting for this. And a lot of people leave that out because they don't know that it costs money. We provide 3D renderings. We provide all the architectural services. And we also have our designers on staff here. Plus, we also have our full production crew, which makes us a design build company. Depending on the scope of work of your project, really, you have to take all those things into account. So, when we propose a proposal for a client for a project, that comes with a design fee. And in that design fee, a lot of those elements to go through the design process before you get to a contract so that you know exactly what you're spending at the very end. Because at the end of the day, that's exactly what you want to know is how much you're going to spend for this project. And going through that design process gives you exactly how much you're going to spend with all these selections and everything that you're going to be doing. So that is a very important part of how we go about doing that and making sure that we can assure that the design that you want is what we're going to be able to create for you for that budget.
That makes sense. And what about people that are using an architect as opposed to a design build firm? Because they're going to need to consider the architect fees, probably a different designer, and then the contractor, right?
Correct. And the thing about doing that, and we have clients that come in with their own plans. A lot of times those plans are conceptual plans only. They're not anything that we can build off of. So it gives us a good guideline, but now you've spent, $5,000, $10,000 with an architect for those plans, and we have to now recreate them, and we're going to charge you to do that. So that is that's a step that I would probably say is better not to do, and just have us kind of go through that whole thing with you, because now you're dealing with one person that has the group, has the team that can help you all together, but you're communicating through one person, not 3 or 4 different people.
I would say, and from my perspective, at a minimum, before you go do anything, research what kind of project you want to do. Because if you do want design build, don't pay someone else for something that's, to your point, they're not going to use. But if you do want to do the architect, at least do your research to know what you're getting in those different scenarios.
Yes, absolutely. Do your research, and just make sure that the type of project that you're wanting to do, whether it's a kitchen, bath, or room addition or whatever, that those elements of design, architectural, and production, I think all those things have to come into play together. It is better if you're dealing with one person, in my opinion. I've done it I built houses before where I've dealt with the builder, I had to deal with the architect, I've had to deal with the engineer, and then I'm my own designer. So it is a nightmare to do, but it is sometimes a necessity when you're doing something like that. But I think when you have one person to deal with, it's so much easier, because I've been on both ends of that.
For sure. You feel like you're managing a project, which that's why you hired all those people to not manage a project.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think when you're budgeting, don't leave out the architectural, the design aspect of what that is, because that is a fee, but overall, that is how you get to your final contract and your exact number of how much that project is going to cost. And it will help you budget for your project a little bit better.
I think that's great advice. So what would be your next step in determining your budget after you've gotten that?
I would say the next step would be looking at what the overall look of the scope of work that you're wanting to do. Once you have a budgetary number, if for some reason that budgetary number is more than what you want to spend, which I would say that's 50-50 on most of the clients that we're talking to today, I would probably say look at some different financing options. Look at, say, for instance, we offer services from Capital Federal Bank, and we work closely with them. They give us a ton of different products depending on the individual's financial situation. They can go from a HELOC, they can do a construction loan, they can do a new build, it could be a construction to perm loan. There's a lot of different ways to go about it. But then we also offer a few different programs within our company that could also help add or supplement the budget that they already have if it does go over. So we do give a lot of different options when it comes to that.
Yeah, I talked to John on our podcast late last year. So if someone is interested in knowing directly what their options are, that's out there. But that led me to another question. What if what you need to spend doesn't necessarily make sense for where you live? What do you suggest in those situations? Because remodeling isn't always cheap, and sometimes neighborhoods, you outvalue your neighborhood. What do you suggest for clients in those situations?
Yeah, and that's a good question. There are a lot of clients that they look at their home value, and a lot of people look at their houses as a money maker. Your houses are not necessarily a money maker. It's an investment that holds value, but it's not a money maker necessarily.
Unless you're flipping them, which is not this conversation.
Right. Exactly. So a typical house, you're going to keep your value, or you don't want to necessarily overbuild or over design past the value of what your area will keep for your property. But when you're looking at whether or not you're going to put, say, for instance, you have a $500,000 home, you want to put in an addition to that home that's going to cost 400,000. Most of the homes in that area are going to be anywhere from 5 to probably 800,000, give or take. You have to really look at, again, how long you're going to be in the home. You have to look at, you could look at the neighborhood. I have, and I know a lot of the other designers have worked with clients who don't care what the neighborhood will hold up for the value of the home. Some of them will say, this is my house. I'm going to be living here. I don't really care about all the other stuff. To me, this is my neighborhood. This is what I love. I love the schools. I love the walking trails. I love the shopping. I love all those things. And this is where I want to be. That plays into the emotion of whether or not you want to be in that neighborhood or not, and what you're willing to spend. And everybody is different. And I think when you're looking at a situation like, say, for instance, an addition, like, you may want to spend a little bit more to say, yeah, this is where I'm going to be. If that is the opposite and you're going to say, well, I'm going to be here, I would like this addition, but I'm not going to be here for that long. Is it worthwhile doing it? And that's where we kind of look at it and say, do you need to do an addition? Can we reconfigure within the space that you have, the footprint of your home, which I've done many times, and reconfigure that space so that you can actually have a better living space without spending a ton more money and still be within the value of your home? So there's a lot of different ways to do it. It depends on the individual client to kind of let us know what their wants and needs are for budget expectation, or going over that area in their subdivision or area that they're living in right now.
What do you recommend? Let's say you have a client that comes to you tomorrow and their house has not had any remodeling in 30 years. They need a kitchen. They need 2 bathrooms. They need new flooring.
Love it.
Bring it on. But what if they can't bite it all off at once? What do you suggest? Perfect.
Yeah, because you don't have to do everything at one time. I've just finished the 5th project over the last 5 years with a client. Every year we've done a project. We've rebuilt basically their whole house, their basement, the middle level, their upper level, now their exterior. I changed all the windows. We've done everything on that house. And that was over 5 years. Originally, they were planning on staying in that house, but now I found out they're moving. But now they have better equity into their house and it works. But when you're looking at doing that type of project, phasing those projects for, say, for instance, you want to do a kitchen and 2 bathrooms. Well, you're budgeting a certain amount of money every year so that you can do this, whether it's coming from bonuses or whatever. And you may have to wait 2 years to do it, or you can use some of the financing options we have, or through Capital Federal. But when we are planning on doing something like that, what we can do is actually tell you per area, this bathroom is going to be this budget range, this bathroom is going to be this budget range, and this kitchen is going to be this budget range. That way it gives you the opportunity to say, what is your priority? Do you want to do the bathroom because the bathroom doesn't work and you need another bathroom? If the kitchen works, do the bathroom. If the kitchen doesn't work, do the kitchen. So there are so many different options that you can do, but I think prioritizing what your needs are for that also, in phasing the project and doing it over a certain period of time. Again, that could be different for everybody. Depending on how long you're staying in the house. I keep going back to that because it's so relevant. And you really need to think about how long you're going to be in that house before you start looking at, doing major projects like that. Because, with going through the pandemic, everybody kind of realized, well, I'm not moving and I'm staying in this house. So I want it to be the best it can be. And that's the kind of mindset of everybody right now. I think we don't see anything changing from that right now. Maybe in the future it will, but as of right now, a lot of people are staying in their house and they want to do something really nice.
Yeah. And there just hasn't been many houses on the market either. So it's like,
Yeah.
even if I do sell my house, where am I going to go? I can't find something in my range. So
That's a problem.
yeah, it makes remodeling very, very relevant.
Yeah. Yeah. And it not only makes it relevant, but I still think most people who are set up to live in their house for a long period of time, they build relationships with their neighborhoods and their communities. They build friendships. They build a standing in the community. So there are many reasons to stay in an area. There's not many reasons, unless it's job related or, maybe financial, to leave a neighborhood, but it's different for everybody.
Yeah, everyone's needs are so very different. People coming to you today thinking that they have an idea that $50,000 is going to get them the full-blown kitchen they want, and then they hear what the actual cost is. How are you working with that today? Because I have to imagine that's relevant to you. Prices have changed drastically in the last couple of years.
Well, prices have changed drastically, not only during the pandemic, but even before that. I think everybody's perception of how much your dollar can actually go in a project, that depends on the scope of work of the project. We deal with a lot of, say, kitchens and bathrooms, that some kitchens we can just pull cabinets and put them back in the same footprint and just do what we call a pull and replace. Replace the cabinets, countertop, sink, tile backsplash, paint touch up, trim, whatever. That's a pull and replace. That's a pretty basic kitchen remodel. That's not necessarily a full-blown remodel. A full-blown remodel, getting everything down to studs and redoing a lighting plan, redoing your HVAC venting returns, redoing all your electrical, all your flooring, all your ceilings, all of your drywall, trim, paint, you name it. And then all the cabinetry, finish, and countertops, tile, hardware, accessories. Kitchens and bathrooms are probably the most detailed areas in the home. And there's so many different components that go into it. When you start looking at all the labor that goes into a full-blown remodel versus just a pull and replace, it is vastly different. But both of them have been increased in cost because cabinet costs have gone up, countertop costs have gone up, tile has gone up a little bit, but labor and materials have all gone up. So what 25, 30,000 used to pay for 20 years ago, today it only does a portion of whether it's a partial remodel or a full-blown remodel. It only does a portion of that now. And an average kitchen for like a pull and replace, I mean, you could be looking at $40,000 to $50,000, depending on the size of the kitchen and the type of cabinetry, type of countertops, and so forth. When you look at a full-blown kitchen, those right now, we're having a hard time getting a kitchen under 100,000 right now,
which is mind blowing.
Yeah. There are some kitchens that we can do, and this all depends on size of the kitchen.
Right.
So it really depends on what type of kitchens you're going for, what age the home is. So if it's a newer house, like a 1990, what we call a newer house, a 1990s house, that house probably has less issues than what house in Brookside that was built in 1909. When we do one of those homes, that's a complete gut. We take out all the plumbing, we take out all the electrical, we start from scratch, basically. And that is a lot more money. And, a $75,000 remodel for a kitchen, even in 2018, 2016, now is pushing 90,000. And that's a small Brookside kitchen. So it really depends. There's so many elements that can vary what you pay for a kitchen or bathroom or any kind of remodel today, there is some sticker shock out there. And I think it's getting the reality of how far your dollar can go. And today, unfortunately, it doesn't go as far as we'd like it to. We, as designers, are still shocked when we put together these bids because we're like, holy cow, I can't believe it's taken this much to do that kitchen, and we know what it used to be, but we have to go by today, by what current value is.
Yeah. So we're running out of time. Ron, do you have any last words of wisdom for all those folks out there that are in that boat? They're looking at the kitchen and they're thinking, it's time. I got to start budgeting. Any last words of advice?
I would probably say the first thing to do is create your lists of what you like and don't like, wants and needs. I would look at how long you plan on being in that house for sure, and have a prioritizing plan for the areas that you want to remodel in your house. Because I think that is what is going to give you the best options for what you can do. Look at the financial options, look at some of the different options, because sometimes it can make a big difference on what and how you pay for your remodel. Making sure that you do all those things and respect the process as you're going through, and don't waste your time getting 8 different bids, because you're going to waste your time by doing that. 2 or 3 bids is really all you need to get, but make sure that they're from reputable companies and they are companies that have good reviews. They have great service. Those are the companies you want to work with. Everybody has a brother that wants to help you do your basement, and sometimes that works, but most of the time it just takes longer.
Thank you, Ron. I think this is great information for people that are just starting to explore this process and helping guide them. So appreciate your expertise in the area.
No problem. Thank you very much. It was great.